Welcome to Body Kindness. Learn and grow.
This is a special podcast series where we help anyone just getting started with body kindness.
We're reflecting on how we have evolved since our earliest episodes. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield.
And I'm Bernie Salazar. Let's get ready to spiral up together.
You're listening to A Good Start by Montplaisir, which you can get at freemusicarchive.org. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to ask you to do two things. First is make sure that you have completed the Body Kindness e-course. It's absolutely free. It is one of the best ways where you could learn more about the philosophy and start implementing it in your life. And it's awesome. So if you visit bodykindnessbook.com/start, you can sign up for that. And that way you will be able to also get updates about the podcast and other things I might have going on. And that includes for helping professionals. Make sure you check that box at the sign up and let me know because there are always some great special things I have for fellow helping pros so we can bring more body kindness to more people. If you have not yet read the book, that's also a really wonderful foundation as you start to think about your spring and summer and beach reads and everything. I hope you'll consider the Body Kindness book. You're going to get self-reflective prompts to use throughout the chapters as you dip into different areas of your life where you would like to see a better sense of well-being and a better practice of speaking kindly to yourself and taking good care of yourself without ever dieting again. If you have read the book and have not left a review, that would be amazing as well. I think I'm very close to 100 on Amazon. And so I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Finally, I just want to ask listeners if you have any amount of disposable income that you would like to kick toward the show's production costs. That really means a lot, especially for episodes like this where Bernie is included. He's compensated for his time as well as the production costs that go into bringing you all these episodes. That link is gofundme.com/bodykindness. Again, gofundme.com/bodykindness. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Hey, Bernie, what's up?
Hey, Rebecca, just here ready to talk about stress.
I know we were talking before I hit record about how stressed we feel talking about stress.
Exactly, which I think actually lends itself quite well to the reflection today. Looking forward to just kind of sharing how I tend to deal with stress nowadays as opposed to in the past. And it's been quite eye-opening, this journey of getting to figure out who I am now, given the different responsibilities, right, at different stages of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what we'll be able to talk about is how you can change your relationship to stress. I think is one of the most important things. I know I certainly had that view of like, all stress is bad and it's going to kill you. And, I don't feel that way now anymore, but I can also make a lot of sense of why I believed that back when I was younger. And so I'm excited to share. But before we play the clips from the Upside of Stress that we recorded originally a couple years ago, I wanted to ask you to think about this question that will then hit in the reflection. And that's, do you think people can stress eat? And that's just one of the ways of getting through stress. Speaking of that stressful situation of all the new research, we had started our first book club, The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigle, and we read it, and we did have some listeners reading along too. So this episode we're going to kind of use as a chance to talk about stress, and I'll reference the book here and there, but it's definitely a wonderful book. I highly recommend you read it, and for those who might be interested, from time to time, you'd have to kind of get on the schedule to see, but Kelly McGonigle does do a Stanford University online course about stress. Probably called The Upside of Stress. I took it. It's very good. And it's a way to learn in groups, and you actually get kind of group Skype chat time with her, and everything's recorded. And so if you read Upside of Stress and liked it, or you love the episode today, I would just kind of make sure you're following her on all her social media, and try to take a look at if at some point in your future you could possibly take her stress class. So with that, I just kind of wanted to get started and just ask you, like, Bernie, like, what are the different ways that you feel like you experience stress in your life?
For me right now, and this is how I view stress, so I want to make sure that I'm making it clear. Stress for me isn't always negative. Before I read Kelly McGonigle's book, stress can be a great experience, like having to come home after a day of working and be there for my daughter. And again, when I say stress, it's just, hey, am I energetic enough for her? Am I fully engaged with her? So that is one aspect, is really trying to make it through my entire day and be present. I allow that sometimes to quote unquote stress me out. Of course, there's the stress that your daily responsibilities bring, whether it be at work, any deadlines. Also, am I getting in that workout? Am I eating right? Where are my finances? I mean, these are all things that I experience as well and stress about. And when I don't sit back and look at it or manage it, stress is definitely something that leads to my other habits that aren't, true to body kindness, which is, eating more than satisfies me, or, not getting that exercise in.
So did you say that before you read the book, you had a different view of stress and that helped change it, or?
Well, when it came before the book, because I gained so much insight from actually the book, but I did also understand, at least for myself, that stress didn't have to be a negative event.
Right.
So I want to clarify. I knew that even a good thing could potentially be considered stress.
Yeah.
Because the body doesn't know the difference between positive and negative stress. Mm-hmm. That was my mindset beforehand. But after really diving into Kelly McGonigle's book.
So before I picked up her book, I'm trying to remember how I might have read her other book first. Oh, I remember seeing the title and I said, Upside of Stress. Yeah, right. There is no upside of stress. I don't need that book. Exactly. Because who am I if I'm not always gritting my teeth or saying, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. But I loved her other book about willpower. I found there's to be some interesting things in there that I just decided, oh, what the heck. And I loved it. I mean, before reading it, I thought that stress was going to kill me. That's what you read, everything's compared to stress. And even when I was working on my manuscript for Body Kindness, what I had in the proposal was very different than what I ended up working on after learning from Dr. McGonigle. And that I never really saw the idea that you can shift your mindset about stress. And I just found, her example in the book about the Sensi shake, I could not believe. And that was the study, Aaliyah Crum, who is now a Stanford researcher. The bottom line in the book is, she talks about the effect you expect is the effect you get, and how they could take the same exact drink, and for one, it's labeled, indulgence or something. The other one's labeled Sensi shake. Inside is the same thing, but people who thought they were drinking the indulgent shake had a different response than people who thought they were drinking the Sensi, the kind of diety weight loss shake. And this wasn't just how they perceived the taste, all that stuff that you would think. It's literally how their blood sugar responded. And I find that fascinating. I definitely believe in mind-body connection, and we will keep exploring that in this podcast, and it's a big part of the Body Kindness book. But the fact that you can experience something in life and that changes how biochemically your body responds, I just find to be really fascinating. And I think that's why her book works, because it's really about shifting our own mindsets about what stress is, its purpose, and what to do about it. And
what I learned overall from reading that book is that before, I would believe all stress is bad. Stress is going to give you a heart attack. I always had this belief that I can't handle it. I can't cope. Stress was a big trigger for emotional eating for me when I was dealing with it, because it was all this idea of like the ground was falling out beneath my feet, that I'm in danger. And I thought that I'm in imminent danger. I could get hurt. And it's really what led to self-sabotaging behavior. So while I was able to do other work to learn and grow from that before this book, I found a lot of really important connections for me about how I was going to handle stress in my own life and how I was going to handle it with clients, because I would tell clients, yeah, stress is going to kill you. Come on, stop it. So this is why I say you should always be a student and always learn, because reading her book, it really was life-changing for me to reframe stress. And it seems like that's what you were getting out of it too. And wisely acknowledging these day-to-day things that are stressful, right? Like making it through the day. A lot of what I got out of that is we always question, am I blank enough? Did I do this good enough? Am I enough of a dad? Did I do good enough at work? How am I doing with my spouse? And what she says in the book is that stress is energy, and it's a sign that something that matters to you is at stake. Well, if you didn't give a crap about your kids or your wife or your job, I'd be worried about you,
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed, and I just want to jump in real quick, how open she was, and how she took the time to really look at the way that she used to approach it, much like yourself. You guys really do remind me of one another, and the fact that you are so willing through study and through investigation to reframe maybe the way that you thought about certain things in the past, which to me is just a sign of someone who is truly looking to provide the best information out there for the benefit of the people that they're in contact with. So I appreciated that. And you're absolutely right. I think that for her, she had started off telling a lot of her clients, stay away from stress. It's going to hurt you. It's going to kill you. I know that in my own personal life, we have family members that will go around saying, oh, I'm so stressed out. And then another family's member's response to them is, well, you just really need to just the stress of your life, or go on a vacation and escape this type of stress. But what Kelly was saying is use that stress, turn it into something positive, let it fuel you. And I loved hearing that, because at that particular time, I was experiencing what I considered stress, and I think that I was allowing it to go down instead of propel me forward.
Yeah, well, and it's you're not the only one. I mean, that is the way she kind of splits it up, is that some people, when they get the stress response and that I can't handle it belief, they don't secrete as much DHEA, and that's the growth hormone. They don't secrete as much compared to other people who believe they can handle it. When you're getting that DHEA, that's literally growth hormone to help your brain learn and grow, to build the neurons. It's like strength training. Your brain is doing a workout, So you want to be exposed to stress in your life. We all go through big stress, big traumas, and some have more than others. And by and large, a majority of people will bounce back from even big traumas and the sort of day-to-day stressors that they have. And most people at least bounce back to where they were before the stress. A small percentage experience something that's called post-traumatic growth. And that is when you actually find that your life has more meaning and is somehow in some way better than your life before the major stress, the major trauma. And it's not that you need to be grateful for a bad thing happening to you, but it's that you believe that experience changed you and changed your direction, which I think is amazing. And then an equally or similar, I won't say equally, but a similar small percentage of people experience more of the negative opposite of that, which is they don't bounce back to normal, and they deal with variations of depression and anxiety and PTSD. And, the thing is no matter where you would fall under that curve, to know that if you are someone who is dealing with depression or anxiety, I mean, that's why we have helping professionals. And if anyone is listening who is just isolating yourselves or saying, no, I'm not going to do this, or I don't think it's going to work for me, or, we can't get through really bad things in our life alone. We don't do that. Isolating yourself is one of the ways stress hurts you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm just jumping in because I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the things that she talks about in her book is the tendon befriend.
Yeah.
And to me, that came across as, a lot of times, just like you were saying, Rebecca, we tend to isolate. We tend to try to go within ourselves. And I personally am guilty of that and have been. And I'm really looking at how to change that in my own life when we're feeling this sense of stress and these overwhelming factors in our life. This whole tend and befriend approach really resonated with me. It's like, hey, let me go ahead and find people around me, and also not just to take of them and to ask for them to help you in your situation, but for me to get outside of myself and actually see what's going on with them and potentially help them back. And the fact that can be so helpful in really getting you to the place where you need to be and maybe out of that current state that you're finding yourself in, or at least assist you to get out of that state.
Yeah.
That was really powerful. And the other thing that struck me was the fact that those individuals who experienced, quote unquote, stress in their lives or a hardship, hard times, it really helped to build up a resilience to some of those more serious and very real life events that occur. And one example that she stated, it was very interesting to me. It was just about how, and again, I'm not as cool as Rebecca. I'm not going to spot up who it was or what's going on. But I love stories. I'm a big story guy. So I whenever I'm able to visually imagine what's being talked about in the book, it tends to really stick with me. So there was some research done on individuals who were just literally placing their hand in very ice cold, freezing water. And the long story short, it just showed that those individuals who experienced more quote unquote stressful life events, big events in their family, somehow were able to keep their hands submerged for longer in the cold. And that just kind of cracked me up because it just really made sense. I pictured a bunch of people sticking their hand in cold water and literally just sticking it out.
So bringing up tend and befriend, it's one of the ways our bodies respond to stress, and it's the one that we don't think of at first, but you're absolutely right. I loved being encouraging to reach out, and because people who are close to you, they want to be there for you, but they can't without your permission. You have to let them know it's okay. And people my clients will say like, well, I don't want to ask. I don't want to put somebody out. Think of if the roles were reversed. You'd be pissed at your friend or your spouse or whoever it is, the person that you want to reach out to. You'd be so upset if they didn't reach out to you. And so I feel like that's another problem is it's like, I don't want to bother that person. And that is your inner critic. That's you kind of being hard on yourself that you don't feel worthy of connecting to the people who want to be able to help you. You're going to solve your own problems. You're going to save yourself. You're going to save your own, issues, life, however you frame it, because you have the abilities and you are resilient. You have it in you. But tend and befriend, we all want to do something to make a bad situation better. And I'll just add a note, being a food person, that it is a very natural response for a tend and befriend response. What happens, and so you go and you make them cookies or you make them a dinner, right? Even the good stress of having a new baby, people brought you dinners, right? Exactly. Or, you lose a loved one and people want to say, hey, can I cook for the family? People naturally want to show up, be there for somebody else. And we know that cookies and cakes and family dinner, easing, doing those things, those gestures don't take away the pain. They don't make the stress go away. But having a stress-free life is a myth. And so it's really about when these things happen, what do you do about it? Who do you reach out to? Who is in your corner? Who's going to be there for you? And then through Tendon Befriend, you realize I don't do this alone.
Exactly. And Rebecca, you really said it wonderfully. And for all of our listeners out there, if this is something that you're experiencing, please know, just kind of like what Rebecca hit on, is there are people in your lives that are definitely wanting to be there for you. As I'm speaking to you out there, go ahead and reach out and let's hopefully work towards getting maybe some of these stressful feelings or events that are happening in your life working for you long term.
Yeah. So I kind of want to shift gears for a little bit. I still want to talk about, still on topic of stress, but I can just hear the listeners going, well, kind of like yes, but type thing. So why don't we kind of walk through just, so we can get some practical kind of tips and dialogue going, but we'll just take like that sort of learned habit of emotional eating, that's triggered by stress. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, I lose my appetite and I don't stress eat. And so it could be another reason that might drive you to eat, or maybe it's drinking alcohol or skipping a workout. But just, it could be anything like that. But it's basically an unhelpful way of coping. So, something happens, right? And, say it's a stressful event that happens, we can sometimes overreact to it, right? And so it's like someone else is driving the bus. We don't stop and think. It's just automatic pilot reacting. It's literally out of habit. We have this reaction where we don't feel in control of what's going on. And what we need to do is some sort of an escape or avoidance, or just let me not pay attention to this. Let me not feel. Let me not think. And then that's where we open up the cookies, or we drive and get a cupcake on the way home and eat it in the car, and, anything like that. So that is, I would say, probably like the typical pattern, right? Or it might be skipping the workout, or let me open up a bottle of wine. And it's not just a calming, relaxing glass with dinner. It's like you finish the bottle by yourself and then you don't sleep good. So would you agree that that's kind of like a typical in your experience, or in, most people's experience, that that stuff like that happens?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you pretty much hit it on the head, different times in my life. Those are kind of the things that I tended to go towards. But again, that's I mean, you hit it right on the head.
Yeah.
There's no more.
Yeah. Period. And stop. So
I'm pretty sure some of our listeners are out thinking, yes.
yes. But so really, if we take the time now to stop and think about it, it's like the question to ask, right? So we've got this idea that it's in our mindset. We understand that it's, it's this feeling that we can't handle it. So how do we do a shift to our mindset? How do we, kind of try to change it up and to reframe stress? And the very first thing is to just be able to pause, so that we have that minute to stop and think and know like exactly where I'm at right now and what's happening, and to be able to describe what's going on. It's like, oh, I just got the hammer laid down on me, something at work, and he's a jerk, whatever. And then boom, I'm telling myself that a cupcake's going to make it better, or, we eat ice cream, we eat pizza in bed, whatever it is. To be able to stop and just say, what is going on, what happened, and what you're thinking brings it to your awareness. And that is very helpful, because you can't begin to fix things that you aren't aware of. And I mean, we know the common sense side of it, how much pizza does it take to make that problem go away? Or how much beer does it take? Truthfully, has any amount of food or alcohol or any, anything like that, has any replacement avoidance placeholder ever really solved your problems?
Yeah. No, absolutely not. I can speak from personal experience. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, so what does it do? I mean, what would you say are the benefits, just to brainstorm out? Like, what's the benefit of, because it's something that people do. So what are the beneficial purposes of emotional eating or soothing with alcohol? I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to kind of look at it, but what are the benefits?
Well, I mean, some of my initial thoughts, Rebecca, would be, it's that instant, immediate gratification. For me, when I tended to engage in behavior like that in the past, it was literally filling this space
Yeah.
that maybe, I felt was empty or taken away from me or lost in the conversation or due to that stressful experience. But it always ended up where I felt even worse afterwards for having overdone it, having not planned it out appropriately, not having truly enjoyed whatever it was that I was doing. And let me elaborate on that. I mean, there would be times where, when I was overly rigid, I feel, in what I was putting in my body or the amount of time I was working out, I wasn't enjoying all those aspects, So if I had a stressful day, I'd say, well, I have been this and this and this for so long. I've stayed away from this. I'm just going to go ahead and grab it. I owe it to myself. Today was a stressful day. Well, I had really deprived myself, unfortunately, of that type of thing for so long that when I was stressed out, I would just consume it and not even enjoy it. I'm thinking to myself, wait, if I was going to do that, I should have had a whole experience planned around it. I should have had a date with that cupcake, like lit a candle, brought it home, unpackaged it, and literally enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping some of our listeners are hearing, because I personally am not saying don't have that.
Yeah.
But my thing is saying, let's be smart about how we choose to enjoy things that maybe we normally wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And it's not about the food at all, actually, in that scenario, because you're right. That sort of beneficial purpose is it's an instant gratification. Rarely do clients say that in those moments they're really, really tasting it. And I'm not saying the most mindful, almost orgasmic eating experience of your life, but sometimes they don't even chew it,
with how quick that thing disappeared.
Exactly.
I mean, it was gone.
Yeah.
And I even forgot I had purchased it or consumed it. So yes.
Yeah. It's not the enjoyment. It is more about not feeling. And think about it. If you really feel threatened, right? If the trigger that you're feeling is this is a threat and I don't think I can handle it, you would do whatever is life-saving in that minute. And when people are dealing with emotional eating, that automatic pattern is this is life-saving in some way, right? Or at least going to somehow make things better in the short term. But as you pointed out, in the long term, when you're back to more of a steady state mood and emotion, right? So the emotional intensity has reduced a little bit and you can think a little bit more clearly and mindfully in big picture, like, the 2 days from now, Bernie, or something like that. That exactly. is, or maybe an hour later, but then you can think and realize that's not what I really wanted. That's not the kind of person I'm trying to be. But often that is when the guilt and shame roll in because of feeling bad about what you did, but then also what is worse than guilt, because people make mistakes and we need to be compassionate about that. But it's when you add that level of shame and therefore I'm a bad person or I'm hopeless, because all that negativity just seals the deal. You say you're hopeless and you're hopeless. You say you're not worth it and you're not worth it. Your self-motivation to take good care of yourself, to be kind to your body, to do something about it is just, it's blown out like blowing out birthday candles. It's gone. And so what is so, so, so important, I don't care if you've been emotionally eating, if you could have a PhD in it, you're so smart, so good at it. No matter where you are, you can change it and you can make a difference. It starts with the awareness. It starts with, it starts with so many things. There's all these different little tools that come in, but you can't begin to fix what you're not aware of. So, you're listening to this podcast, maybe you decide to listen to Upside of Stress or read it, and you really start to reframe, okay, these are my triggers. These are the things that kind of cause this uncertainty in my life. that then have me automatically and learning that this is when I go to food or drink or, other ways that aren't the way that I want to take good care of myself. And it's very important work to do, because once you know your triggers, then you could plan what you're going to do the next time you're triggered. And that's how you try to work around it. So, I did want to take a couple minutes to revisit something very specific, because we do need to look at it with a sense of awareness and understanding what's going on in it, but to challenge it and to say, you know what? This isn't helpful. In the short term, I might say it tastes good, or I get to avoid feeling that way. But when the problem is still there, in the long term, that thing is not helpful. And as long as you realize that something's not helpful, it's the only question you need to answer. Because why do something that's not helping you? And if that fuels your commitment to stop, then it's the next step. And what do I want to do when these triggers happen? What do I want to do to set goals for myself and to make the choices in line with the kind of person I want to be?
Yeah, no, you hit it right on the head. And we've talked about this off air as well, where, the choices that you make do have to reflect who you want to be long term. And at the end of the day, you owe it to yourself to really think this through, just like you said, and actually be present. And yeah, I'm in total agreement. I'm shaking my head at everybody.
Cool. Well, so yeah, it's kind of like what we want to get out of it is that it's not the stress, it's how you respond to stress. And so really take deep looks at how, for the listeners, how are you responding to the stressful events in your life? How can you learn to value everyday stress? Can you find a beneficial purpose to that stress? Like we started off with that. I said I'd be disappointed if you weren't worried about were you doing what you need to do for your daughter, your family, or doing good at work. You need your job because you need money, because you need security for your family. It's all related. So to see these things as everyday stress as helpful, that it enhances your biology. It gives you energy to learn, to grow, to get through what you need to do. And that stress is variable, it comes and goes. It has highs and lows. And that when you feel it working up, that is when you can mindfully say, hey, I need a breather. I need a pause from work. I need a drink of water. I need to walk around the block. I need to call a friend and vent for a little bit. But it is really about building this self-awareness that I can't have a stress-free life, and I don't want one because stress makes me strong. So what do I do? How do I respond to stress in ways that I think are normal or that I want to be able to do one day? And then frankly, you just start practicing it now.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit it on the head when you said start practicing it now, because it's amazing how what we feed grows. And grows, as far as our perception of certain things. And what we're talking about, at least for me personally, since really engaging and reading this book is, what have I been fueling? And I've been fueling more of that stress is harmful, stress doesn't help me, as opposed to it does, it can, it will. So for any listeners out there, because, I'm pretty critical in the things that I engage in. And I was thinking to myself, okay, well, maybe this is a little too huggy, it sounds like. It could, when you read the title, The Upside of Stress. But at the same time, take a step back. Think about what you're fueling in your life. And if you're feeling the whole stress is harmful, it's going to be the death of me, well, guess what? It is. But if you're looking at it the opposite way, stress is something that I can grow from. Stress is something that I can come out stronger as a result of experiencing. Guess what? You will.
At the very end, she tries to kind of sum things up for us and, brings it all back to mindsets, and that, it's really about understanding that there are unexpected benefits of stress that are attainable. And she gave 3 things. Stress makes you stronger. Okay, we talked about that, the DHA, the learn and grow. It's that your self-doubt is replaced by confidence. I mean, that is huge. Going from I can't handle it to I can handle it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you were even saying that after you read the book that there were ways that you kind of handled stress differently as a result and it sounded like from being more confident rather than more
Oh, absolutely.
doubtful.
Yeah, I mean, because here's the thing: when you run into experiences in your day-to-day life, whether they be at work or at home, sometimes you tend to doubt your ability to handle that situation. But the truth is, you are more than capable of doing it, and it is just your view on it. Just like she said, and it has really changed the way that I've operated since. And
Yeah.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah. And the third point of the stress mindset of the unexpected benefits is that I love, this is my favorite. Fear becomes courage. Because that for me, for sure, it was like I could feel the earthquake underneath my feet and I was going to fall in that crack. It was when I had high intensity emotions that drove me to self-sabotage and not take care of myself. It was intense fear of that everything I cared about was falling apart and that I was inadequate, that I would not be able to deal with it. And that is where the sabotage came in. And then another thing she noted, which I think is so, so, so important, there's these 3 points of when stress is most likely to be harmful. When you isolate yourself, right? So you nailed the tendon befriend stuff.
Absolutely.
So it's harmful if you isolate yourself. It's harmful if you feel inadequate to handle it. So every time you tell yourself this sucks and I can't handle it, you're making it true. And that is when you're more likely to have a negative impact or have stress negatively impact you because you're isolating yourself. You're saying I'm inadequate. I mean, I guess, look, truthfully, now that I'm going to critique that one and say you can feel inadequate, but I think that you can acknowledge those negative thoughts and feelings, but choose to redefine that and saying, well, I'm getting feelings that I'm adequate, but I am committed to my well-being and I'm committed to say I can handle this. So I don't, you might feel inadequate to it and that's likely to be harmful. But if you notice that you feel inadequate, that is what you change. You say, I choose to focus on feeling enough that I do have what it takes, that I will handle it. Just flip that around. And then the third way that stress is likely to be harmful is if it feels meaningless and against your will. So if what is happening to you feels meaningless and against your will, like you have no control over it, then that is going to be a problem for you. So in that regard, again, if you feel that way, that is your perception. But is that truly a belief? Is that what you truly think is possible? Or how can you shift that mindset? Bad stuff happens all the time. And I'm sure things that we don't even want to happen to us. And they may be against our will and we cannot control it. But how can we tend and befriend? What do we need to work through to ensure our safety and our well-being so that we can begin the process of bouncing back from those very big stressful things in our life so they don't give us heart attacks and so they don't harm us, like we're fearing. Number 1, get your support circle, at least one person who you can be real with. I've got a gratitude circle. I love my gratitude girls. They really raise me up when I need them. Number 2, affirm your strength. Find examples of resilience in your life of when you've bounced back, when you've handled it. It doesn't need to be health related, but prove to yourself that you have what it takes. Write down how you want to respond to problems that are bothering you. And then number 3, find meaning in your really, really crappy situation. You don't have to fake I'm so glad that I'm really struggling with emotional eating. Woohoo! I'm so glad I think exercise sucks. No. It can suck, but there's a meaning there. Something you can put into action. Why do you want to exercise more? Why do you want to overcome emotional eating? What is it that you are missing? What is it that can give you a better life that's related to body kindness, love, connection, and caring? You've got to find the meaning in your negativity if you're going to flip around your mindset about stress as something that can have unexpected benefits. It's information. It's there to help me learn and grow. And yes, I am strong and I can handle it. And we're back.
Yay, stress.
We love it. More
Right?
stress. An all-you-can-eat stress buffet. So the first question I had for you, Bernie, is I'd love to know, so it's been
2.5 years at least since we first started talking about the practice of body kindness and being good to yourself, and certainly how you relate to your emotions and how you navigate, your emotions, especially negative emotions, is part of practicing body kindness. And so stress is going to be inextricably linked to the practice. And it's not that we can expect that we all have a stress-free or a pain-free life, but more about changing how we relate to it. So I'm just really curious how you're doing now, what's stressing you out now, and if there's any insight you have into how any differences in how you handle stress now versus maybe a couple years ago.
Well, yeah, that's a lot. And I'm sure our listeners can relate. So, one thing that we did early on, and it was just shared in the earlier version of this podcast, was you introduced me to Dr. McGonigle's book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, it was very eye-opening. I went ahead and I downloaded that and just listened to it, the audio version of it, just so I could reduce my stress of having to read it.
I'm with you on the audiobook.
Right. And it really resonated with me. And it resonated with me because it allowed me to really take a different look at how I was defining stress and how I was allowing it to overwhelm me and to feel as though I was being trapped by it. So that really helped to start my evolution in how I handled it. It's taken a long time. I still get quote unquote stressed out, but nowadays I'm finding that I take closer look at what is stressing me out, whether or not I have control of that. And I also really think about, can the stress that I'm feeling in this particular situation help me solve what is stressing me out? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Right.
I mean,
like for what I want to do, is that practical? Is that really going to help me deal with this problem? So, and that's part of it. It's not necessarily how do I make stress go away? Like, I can't feel this. This can't be hard. How do I make it go away? But it's more like, okay, so is what I'm thinking of doing, is that actually helpful or is it avoiding? And I know we've talked in previous Learn and Grows about the tendency to avoid. There's been threads with that, like with avoiding and numbing and emotional eating and everything
absolutely.
like
that. And that was me. So I definitely avoided, I always, like I shared before, had this feeling of numbness. So nowadays, whether it's, being the father of a 3-year-old or, really working on my relationship with my wife, and I don't consider that stress as a bad thing all the time.
Hey, I'm partnered. It is stressful.
No, absolutely. And that's what we're all about, is, really sharing, honestly and openly, any relationship that you have, whether it be with a family member or the partner that you've chosen for life.
Yeah.
I've really taken my time to evaluate what I'm feeling in that relationship, and how it's quote unquote stressing me out, and what I can do to connect to that particular moment so that it's not overwhelming or getting out of hand. So I think in the past, what I did was I really had this mangle of emotion, right? Like stressed. And then I didn't know if that stress was anger, or if it was anxiety, or if it was just being tired, or if I was just hungry. So, I mean, it was just
all
a bunch. It was a big jumble. So I think nowadays I really do my best, and I'm not always successful, but I do my best to try to figure out exactly what it is that I'm feeling. And I think that a lot of times in the past, what I defined as stress was sometimes something else, whether that be fear or anxiety or shame, in my case in the past. So, or being depressed or coping with the situation,
So what's interesting about all of those feelings is that they're all things that would like spike that sympathetic nervous system, right? That fight or flight, which is the stressful event. And what's fascinating is that, so we talk about the willingness to approach that stress with a mindset of I can handle it rather than avoid. And so what's interesting about you kind of calling all those different things stress is maybe before you didn't necessarily have a language, like an intuition to kind of connect into the variability of the emotions that, better helps you understand that it's okay to feel negative emotions and what is something that I could do that might help this situation. And that's an example of that you are now more adaptable to stress and more resilient. And it would follow that you also kind of have a higher tolerance for like that sort of day-to-day stress, up and down of emotions, but then with anyone, it could always spill over. And that's where it can get to be really hard to manage. And we've got to do what we can to stay connected. So, whenever we can't begin to adapt to a stressful or anxiety producing situation without first having the awareness that we're in one. And then the very next thing is about, like, once you notice you're in one, it's about, okay, taking a meaningful action. Not that you need to be ashamed or frustrated or angry that you're having that moment, but now that I'm here, what's the next logical choice that will help me move forward? Something else that I was thinking about, it just literally bubble popped into my mind when I was hearing you talk. I wonder if we think about a couple years ago when you were very, very, very first starting, we know, right, scientifically that dieting is a stressful event. It's a traumatic assault on the body. Like, you're biologically starved. It literally, the hypothalamus to literally try to keep you surviving, no matter what you weigh. If you're restricting your food, no matter what you weigh, doesn't matter. Your body doesn't care. It creates the cascade of a stress response and you get rushed with cortisol, right? So you had all that window, but then you had the fighting with your body window and all the shame, like you brought up earlier. So I almost wonder, because of how you've evolved with self-compassion, kindness, being good to yourself, right? Building truly self-care habits that you can live with, being a partner, owning a business, having a 3-year-old, all those things, right? That, like, we just can't put 24 hours a day into our fitness, but you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no,
that you're actually
absolutely.
less stressed now.
I never thought about that, and I would not doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, when we had recorded this earlier, or the initial version of stress,
Mm-hmm.
there were points, and I don't know if any of our listeners can relate. I had, I don't know what it's even called, but I had bald patches, like little alopecia patches.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember first going to a barber and my barber saying, hey, actually, no, I went to a barber, left the barber. The barber wasn't a good communicator. I looked at myself in the mirror and touched the back of my head and realized there was a bald spot back there. And I literally thought that my barber had nicked me really bad. It was the size of a quarter. And I went back to him and I was like, hey, I thought we were friends here. You could have at least given me a heads up. You nicked me. And he said, hey, go ahead and touch that. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, touch it. It's super soft and smooth. That is not my work. He goes, I thought you knew about that. He goes, that's a form of either stress or hair loss. It's common. I see it in a lot, quite a few of my clients. And I never knew what it was. I researched it and did find that it's something that can be brought about by stress, and it ended up happening to me about 4 or 5 times over the course of 3 years.
100%. I'm literally like Googling this. I mean, it makes sense to me as a dietitian that when my clients aren't getting enough energy.
Well, I have pictures. Like, my wife literally was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And my wife's in the beauty industry, right? So she's like every chance she got, I would just catch her looking at my bald spot. And she would like reach her hand over and just try to massage it. She's like, I'm just trying to stimulate the follicles. I'm like, Jen, it's gonna be okay. I didn't care as much. I was concerned. I was like, oh gosh, I really hope it grows back. But the reason I bring this up is, I did not realize how stress and again, my stress was associated with just not being able to identify what I was feeling, when
Mm-hmm.
it came to my body and the shame there, or if it was at that time, I think, that was right when we were pregnant. So I'm like, oh my gosh, we have a baby on the way. And,
Mm-hmm.
just, recently had a loved one pass away. I mean, it was just a ton of stuff that I was not even willing to open the door to really look at.
Mm-hmm.
And my body let me know that it was under a tremendous amount of stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to kind of go back to what you said, I have made a lot of progress. I feel in not associating, gosh, the way my body looks or the size of it with my worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've given myself permission to just enjoy life, whether that be, a nice outing with my family or a wonderful, nourishing meal that
Mm-hmm.
of my choosing,
Mm-hmm.
without feeling bad about it. And yeah, I mean, when you said that right now, it really resonated. But for all our listeners out there, I don't want anybody to walk away from this reflection thinking, oh, he put in the work, he's good, stress doesn't affect Bernie anymore. Like,
You're perfect
that's
now. Now you're perfect.
yeah, now I'm great. Oh, now I don't stress at all. No, I totally stress, but I've also realized there's things that are outside of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also been able to, again, as a result of just working with you and just reading, whether it be Dr. McGonigle's book or just maybe even just being a parent, like you just realize that stress is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
You do need to sit down and acknowledge it. And do what you can to move forward. Now, one of the questions you asked at the very beginning of this was something about stress eating.
Yeah.
Can you ask that question one more time? Because
Yeah.
I blocked it out just a little bit because
I don't really know if we adequately handled the idea of stress eating, the function it can play, and certainly as a clinician and also in our work together and in working with readers over the last couple of years, there's definitely this belief that stress eating is bad and or like shame around it, right? I am bad because I stress ate. And there's just an interesting nuance between actually pausing to observe, well, what is the function of stress eating so that you can make sense of it? And also at the same time, you are allowed to say, well, in some ways this bothers me and I would like to take a look at my behaviors and I would like to see, are there ways where I can learn and grow? But you want to be really careful. Remember, we're talking body kindness about don't set a dead person's goal, right? I'll never stress eat again. Like that's probably not likely to happen. So I wanted to start by asking you just in your honest viewpoint now with wherever you're at and what you know, do you think people can stress eat?
Do I think they can stress eat? Yes. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
am I
like choosing, like
in
I'm
a
stressed.
permission, like, hey, I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do that. I know that, and I've shared this in past episodes, right? I mean, food to me was a protector. It was a confidant. It was my shield in a lot of ways. And so to answer your question, I mean, I know that there are times where I'm dealing with a lot. I have a lot on my plate, and there are trusted friends that I will go to in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's
Ben, Jerry.
Yeah, Ben and Jerry. No, it's funny. I'm more of a savory person, so I mean, I really enjoy a great sandwich, and I think it's something that brings me back to my adolescence and maybe when things were a lot easier. And so nothing's. I'm not going to be there making a 5-course meal. That's not how I think anybody stress eats. It's always reaching for something that's comforting. So to answer your question, I mean, stress eating is helpful. And I don't say helpful as in, here's how I see it, right? I mean, in my work that has led to this conversation, I think you hit on it. I really want our listeners to, I don't even know how to articulate this. I've really taken away a lot of the bad with the food. So when you say like stress eat, like it's, like
food shame, like I am bad because I did this.
Right. So because I really have worked super hard, and I stress that, and I wish our listeners could see my face because I'm like pounding my fists in the air. Like I've taken that away from the equation. So when I say stress eat, like I don't feel in that moment like I'm not in control. Like, oh my gosh, I'm out of control. Or, my decision is, hey, there's this stress in my life that I've identified, that I've sat with for a while, that I'm trying to figure out how to live with or move on from. While I'm doing that, I'm choosing to, in my case, maybe make an awesome sandwich, and it happens to be around lunchtime. Let me feed myself. Where before I would have reached for something that was just mindless, I didn't think about, maybe didn't even really like, and just kind of zoned out and just kept going.
Yeah.
Knowing that no matter how much I ate or what I ate, it was just numb. I was just feeling numb. So I think now I'm sitting with whatever feeling it is, whatever's causing that stress. And another thing too, like, let me be very specific. I don't want to be talking about all the doom and gloom of stress. There's times where I'm so happy or excited about something that to me, my body still and my reactions to it are like that of a negative stressor. So I don't know. I just threw that in there because I don't want our listeners to think that it's just about, the bad. I also found myself, I don't know, I just look at stress differently. And I think that that's what I'm trying to share right now. So to answer your question, it was been long and drawn out. I mean, stress eating, I don't know. I'm still, I don't like you, Rebecca. How about that?
Well, I mean, so the one thing that you had clarified when you were answering was that if you had
a response,
if you had a craving and it was around lunchtime, that the sandwich was okay. And I would this is what I would encourage you to move ahead, is that you always have full permission to eat whatever you want and whenever you want, right? Like, when you don't, from a moral and philosophical place, believe that, you might rely on external reasons to drive whether or not you should eat. So, for example, yes, it's congruent to notice hunger and notice that as a sign you need nourishment and to eat. And you might also be stressed out or stressed and sick or something else, and your appetite is off. That doesn't mean that you don't need nourishment or don't need a meal, no matter what it is. It just means that your appetite is off, and there's probably a good reason for that, right? So people they'll sometimes take intuitive eating, which, like, Body Kindness embraces all of intuitive eating as a guide for how we should be eating. And a lot of people could take that and sort of turn it into a diet, right? As a new set of rules. So it becomes like, eat only when you are hungry. And it's just not necessarily true. Like, and I think that's the point to kind of really get across, is that yes, people can stress eat because it does play a function, right? You do get serotonin when you eat carbohydrate foods. And I talk about this in the book. And it doesn't take a lot of carbohydrate foods. So if you had a sandwich, you would get serotonin through a sandwich. You could also have a banana and Nutella because you wanted something sort of sweet and chocolatey. And in that you would get enough carbohydrate to produce serotonin. And I think there is a spectrum, right? I think some people who are in body shame and like diet culture mode, they see all stress eating as bad, right? That any soothing of emotions with food is bad. And, or again, clarifying with specific rules. I need to be hungry. It needs to be a mealtime. And I think that can really mess people up, instead of this idea of stress eating actually does have a function to produce cortisol to help people regulate emotion. But then at the same time, think about the context of, well, what bothers me about when I stress eat? Because if you delve a little bit deeper, there's probably nuance in there, like a certain time of day that, like when you're not hungry and you just feel negative about it, like screw it, and you kind of beat yourself up about it, right? Versus it is a certain time of day and you're choosing to eat when you're not hungry, and you may be feeling some amount of negative emotion, but you also have built in a skill to like, I'm choosing to sit and enjoy something that I prefer, whether it's sweet or savory, and I'm going to have a moment with this. And so can you reframe that from I'm numbing with food, right? I broke the rule. I'm only allowed to eat when I'm hungry. So I must be numbing with food. So I must be stress eating. So I must suck. And this is why I'm never going to lose weight and get the body I want. And you see that just downward spiral.
Yes.
Can you reframe the whole thing and say, stress eating is one of the ways we cope with stress. And there are ways in which it's functional. I understand the biological function. And there are ways in which I have learned to cope with stress through food that do bother me. And if you're going to go there, step 1 is to stop dieting. Step 2 is nutrition rehabilitation, which means you can't be coming from a restricted place. And that's all part of healing your relationship to food. And I think you'll already see that your trigger to stress eat reduces. And that's in the last 2 years where you've been. I think that is what's happened to you. You're no longer restricting.
Okay. So I'm glad you broke it down that way because, and I want to just be super straight with our listeners. I haven't thought about stress eating in a long time. And it's not because I haven't been stressed out. It's just because I'm not, like you said, maybe I'm just redefining it or I just look at it differently. Like I've noticed that since I've allowed myself to just exist, without that tremendous burden of always judging myself, I guess those episodes for me, and again, not that they're bad, it's just for me, it's changed. I don't have that problem as much or that I'm aware of. I don't want to say anymore, but like just not anywhere near where I was.
But that's awesome. But don't you think that there's at least some chance that it's because you're not restricting anymore and because you're kinder to yourself?
Absolutely. So yes. So to answer the question, yes, I feel that because my relationship with good, bad, you're bad, this or that, this food's bad, along with working to sit with whatever is really getting to me, has allowed me to just not really do that as much. But your question was, is it okay? Sure. Heck yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason why I'm stumbling everywhere is because you've made me really think about how I am now doing or not doing this. And I didn't even realize that till right now. So I don't know. So to answer the question, yeah, I mean, is it? Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
But in terms to myself, I haven't even thought about me reaching for something while I'm stressed out as stressed eating.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? How crazy is that?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it is what it is, and it is where you are. But that's
there were times in my past where I knew I was stress eating.
But you were also restricting, is my point, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Let's go ahead and make sure that, yes.
Yeah.
So I was restricting, I was stress eating, I was reaching for something, I was feeling bad about myself. I knew it wasn't, lending itself to that person I in my mind wanted to be. And I guess I haven't had that. And again, not that I haven't had the stress. I've had a heck of a lot more stresses, I think, in the last year and a half, 2 years than I had when I was balding.
Yeah.
But it's just, it is. I'm just looking at it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I think that's a good place to let it land. It's just when folks are just beginning to learn about body kindness and they're listening to these learn and grows, and it's like, to open up your mind to how stress plays a role in how you feel about yourself, how your inner critic judges everything you do. We have a habit to go right to the problem, right? I stress eat and I've got to fix that, right? Well, maybe you need to stop the restriction and the dieting first, and we need nutrition rehabilitation. Maybe we need to look at stress eating as a functional and beneficial purpose. And then it gets to a point where it isn't benefiting you anymore. And it's not that you'll never stress eat again, but you get to define the context of how you want to, engage in what you would call stress eating, and in a way where you feel good about it, but also feel like you have other tools to
Yes.
use to help you cope and deal with stress. Like, what are some other things that you would say that you use?
For me, it really is just articulating to myself first and to maybe others that are, that I feel in my mind are contributing to that stress, or I'm just starting to address it in a more straightforward way. And it's not easy by any means, but I'm choosing to do that. I have been watching a lot of children's television as a result of being the father of a 3-year-old. And some of the stuff is pretty decent. And there's this one cartoon where, that kind of shares with kids, if you're feeling an emotion, acknowledge it, sit with it, and go from there.
I love that. I learned how to deal with my stress from kids' cartoons.
Yes, right. It just took that. Rebecca, I love that you're bringing it back, and I'm looking at it really from my own journey with this, but I love that you're bringing it back to our listeners that are going to be hearing this for the first time.
Yeah.
And I just want to share with them that I was there where I would just kind of blank out and then feel bad about, what I had done. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it really made me remember how I felt in that moment. And it's also helped me to see where I'm at now, because it's been a trip.
And it will continue to be a trip. One quick thing that I wanted to say before we closed out was acknowledging about stresses that we can't control. And
yes.
I think that this is an area where, definitely since we originally recorded, has been one of my biggest growth areas. And really, it's been like culturally, it's become more salient. And it's where I've chosen to put my, air quotes, big time, spare time into reading and getting coaching and supervision around intersectionality. So there are issues of stresses that we can't control, such as racism, poverty, lack of access to food, our ability, our geography, any way really where we are oppressed by the culture. And it can make body kindness very difficult, and it can keep you in a state of stress. When I summarized in what one of the areas of stress that's likely to be harmful that Kelly McGonigle talked about in her book, it was when that the stress you're experiencing is against your will. And so when I re-listened to our original interview, I was like, that is what I needed to realize that I didn't pick up the first time in the book, was that just to acknowledge that there are many stresses in life that are against our will, that they are strong, powerful features of the system and structures that exist today. And so, to acknowledge that for listeners, that please don't think that if you just took a bubble bath that life would be brilliant,
Yeah.
that's we're not trying to belittle that at all. It's even more of a reason to kind of take a look at how having compassion for yourself in what you are able to do to focus on your well-being instead of weight, to really be flexible with what you can eat and afford food-wise, it's really an elitist view that we've got to, eat everything fresh and zero additives or whatever, but it affects the people with the least amount of money the most, both emotionally and economically. So there's a lot of problems with healthism and today's wellness culture that you do not need in order to improve your well-being. And there are absolutely ways in which the system and structures are failing you and keeping your stress levels high against your will, and are going to make it that much harder for you to practice body kindness. And for that, I think just to even acknowledge that and make space for it, and then ask you, what would it look like if you accepted the things that you couldn't control and really thought about, given the time you have and the conditions and the money resources, what does body kindness look like to me? And letting that be enough. And I think a big part of what's going to help with resilience is a community of people you trust, who you can relate to, who are in a similar boat as you. And anything you can do if you need to create that community, through church groups, school groups, free walking groups, anything that you can do in the direction of focusing on well-being enhancement and not how you take up space is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, bravo. I mean, I like that we're talking about this now. I'm glad that our reflection includes that now. I think that it goes to show, Rebecca, just the work that you're doing, not just with body kindness, but also from a social justice perspective. And I think that it all is extremely important in how we view ourselves, right? And how we allow ourselves to be kind, not only to ourselves, but to others.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that we can tend to want to blame a ton of outside factors and then feel as though we shouldn't do that. But in reality, there are so many things going on in the world around us that we need to acknowledge if we're going to be successful in how we move forward in our body kindness journey.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. And big, the last thing I'll say about it is that they're big problems like eating disorders or disordered eating or body image issues, depression, like those things don't discriminate. I think that they are thought to be like rich, thin white girl, young white girl diseases. That's actually not true. And at the same time, we're dealing with a significant lack of access to adequate support for well-being for people who lack resources, and then for people who lack resources and end up with an eating disorder, disordered eating, any sort of related mental health issue, they lack access to care. So those who get the care have the most money because it's the easiest way through. And that in and of itself is a disease of the system. And that's when I'm able to step back and realize now that we had issues when I was growing up. We had issues with money and consistent food access, and it could have been a lot worse. But knowing what I know now, it was tough. And yet we still had dieting in my house. We still had a hidden eating disorder in my house. And so it's just very, for these light bulbs to go off, it's very, I don't know if energizing is the right word, but I just feel this commitment to be able to say something about it and call it out and say it's not right. And at the same time, we have a listener who is getting access to this show who might be able to make life better for somebody else who has fewer privileges. That's one possible optimistic view. And also somebody who's listening, who hears this acknowledgement, who is lacking access, who might be able to kind of reframe some type of meaningful way forward.
Absolutely.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.